Have you ever wondered how a single act of kindness, something as simple as helping a stranger fix their old Chevy, could change not just one life, but an entire town? This is the story of Caleb Foster, a struggling single dad with grease-stained, hens in a heart bigger than he knows. One quiet afternoon, he lends a hand to a woman broken down on the side of the road. Unaware she carries a secret that will upend everything he thought he knew about his town, his future, and even himself. A diner long forgotten, a clock frozen in time, and two people who didn't realize they were exactly what the other needed. Stick around, because by the time the last pancake is flipped and the final note on the jukebox plays, you'll believe that second chances do exist. Before we dive in, if stories about love, community, and the quiet magic of everyday kindness resonate with you, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. It's the best way to join us for more tales just like this, where small towns, big hearts, and a little hope make all the difference. Now, let's begin. A struggling single dad helped a woman fix her Chevy, unaware she owns the town's old diner. Caleb Foster wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, squinting against the afternoon sun as it glinted off the rusted Foster's Garage sign hanging crooked above him. Another slow day, another quiet hour. Business wasn't what it used to be, not since the big highways rerouted traffic away from their little town. But he'd learned long ago that life, like cars, had a way of breaking down when you least expected, and all you could do was keep fixing. Across the gravel lot, his 10-year-old son Eli darted around, chasing after a paper airplane he'd folded. From an overdue electric bill, Caleb smiled faintly, though his stomach tightened. The bills never stopped coming, but smiles, those were rare treasures these days. The sound of an engine coughing its last breath broke through the stillness. Caleb turned to see an old cherry-red Chevy Impala sputtering toward the garage, barely making it to the front before dying altogether. The driver's door creaked open, and out stepped a woman, tall, maybe mid-30s, with wind-blown auburn hair and a guarded expression. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, but there was something about her, something that didn't quite fit the town's worn-out edges. "Afternoon," she called, pushing her sunglasses up. "I think she gave up on me." Caleb walked over, wiping, his hands again. "Looks like she's got a bit of character," he said, giving the Chevy an appraising glance. "Pop the hood, I'll take a look." The woman nodded and did as asked, standing quietly to the side while Caleb leaned in. Eli wandered over, curiosity bright in his eyes. "Is that a 64? Eli asked. 65, the woman replied with a small smile. "She belonged to my grandmother," Caleb peeked up. "She took good care of it." "Not so much me," she admitted, glancing away. There was a moment of silence before Caleb stood straight. "Fuel line's loose. Won't take long to fix." She seemed relieved, brushing hair from her face. "Thank you. I'm Marina, by the way. Just passing through." Caleb offered a polite nod. "Caleb, and that's my boy, Eli." Eli grinned and waved. Marina knelt slightly, meeting Eli's gaze. "Nice to meet you, Eli. You helping your dad out?" "He's the best at fixing things," Eli said proudly. Caleb felt his chest tighten again. So much faith in those young eyes. 15 minutes later, with a few expert adjustments and some elbow grease, the Impala purred back to life. Marina looked genuinely impressed. "How much?" "Do I owe you?" she asked, reaching into her bag. Caleb shook his head. "Call it a favor. Small towns run on favors." She hesitated, as if not used to people turning down money. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," he replied simply, wiping his hands again. For a moment, Marina seemed like she wanted to say more. Instead, she glanced toward the faded buildings down Main Street. "This town, feels like it used to be something," she murmured. "It still is," Caleb answered, almost instinctively, though part of him questioned it. just takes the right eyes. Her gaze lingered on the row of shuttered shops, the peeling paint, the quiet stillness. Finally, she smiled faintly, nodding toward the diner across the street, a crumbling building with a flickering neon sign that read, Calloway's Diner, letters dim but stubbornly glowing. My grandmother used to talk about that diner, she said softly. Said it had the best pancakes in 3 counties. Caleb followed her gaze. It's been closed a while now. Shame, really. Folks used to line up out the door. Eli tugged at Marina's sleeve, his voice earnest. Dad says the diner was where everyone in town came together, like family. Marina's smile faltered slightly, something unreadable flickering across her face. Family, she echoed, almost under her breath. Caleb cleared his throat, suddenly feeling awkward. If you're hungry, Thompson's grocery down the block. Sells decent sandwiches. She shook her head gently. Thanks, but I should get going. Marina climbed back into her Chevy but paused, resting her hand momentarily on the steering wheel. Her eyes flicked one last time toward the diner before she turned back to Caleb. Thank you, Caleb, she said quietly, for fixing things. He gave a nod, tipping his cap. Drive safe. With a soft rumble, the Impala pulled away, disappearing. Down the empty street, Caleb stood there for a long moment after she was gone, something about the encounter lingering like the scent of rain before a storm. He glanced back at the diner, its windows dusty, the neon letters struggling to hold on. Above the diner's door, through the cracked glass, hung an old wall clock, its hands frozen at 7:15. No one had bothered fixing it for years. Folks stopped, noticing the time when the crowds left, but today Caleb found himself staring at it longer than usual. Maybe, he thought, some things were still worth fixing. The sun dipped low on the horizon as Caleb locked up the garage, the air heavy with the scent of motor oil and dust. Across the lot, Eli skipped stones across the cracked pavement, still brimming with the energy only a 10-year-old could muster. After a long day, Dad, Eli called, pocketing the last smooth pebble, can we go look at the diner? Caleb wiped his hands on his rag, following Eli's gaze toward Calloway's Diner, its neon sign buzzing faintly against the darkening sky. He hesitated, the weight of memories pressing against him. Not much to see, Caleb said, though there was no conviction behind it. Eli grinned. I just want to peek inside. You always say that place used to be the heart of town. With a sigh masked as a smile, Caleb gave in. All right, but just for a minute. They crossed Main Street, the town eerily quiet except for the occasional bark of a distant dog. Caleb pushed gently against the diner's door, surprised when it gave way with a creak. Inside, the familiar scent of old wood and something faintly sweet lingered, as though time itself had been trapped within the walls. Dust particles danced in the dim light filtering through the blinds. The red vinyl booths were faded, some torn. At the seams, a forgotten napkin dispenser sat on the counter next to an empty sugar jar, and high above it all, mounted firmly on the wall, was the old clock, its hands still stubbornly frozen at 7:15. Caleb stood quietly, letting the stillness settle over him. Eli wandered over to the jukebox in the corner, tapping its glass face. Think it still works? Eli asked. Caleb shook his head. Hasn't played a tune in years. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The diner wasn't just a building, it was a relic of who they used to be, a place where birthdays were celebrated, proposals whispered over coffee, neighbors gathered without needing a reason. Caleb walked toward the counter, absently running his fingers over the worn formica surface. He remembered his first date with Eli's mother here. Her laughter, the way she'd ordered pancakes at midnight, claiming breakfast always tasted better when it wasn't morning. A soft voice startled him from his thoughts. You two sure know how to sneak into places. He turned sharply to see Marina standing just inside the doorway, a faint smile on her lips. She leaned against the frame, her arms crossed loosely, the light from outside outlining her silhouette. Eli beamed. "We're not sneaking. Dad's just showing me around." Marina glanced around, her expression softening. "I used to sit right there," she said, pointing to a booth near the window. "My grandmother would bring me here every Sunday after church." Her voice trailed off, and for a fleeting moment, Caleb caught a glimpse of something fragile beneath her calm exterior. "You're from here?" he asked carefully. Marina hesitated, then nodded. "Long time ago, summers mostly." She wandered deeper into the diner, brushing her fingers along the counter, eyes tracing the space like someone reacquainting themselves with an old friend. "Feels smaller now," she murmured. Caleb watched her, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. "Town's changed," he admitted. "A lot of folks left. Some things stayed behind." Marina's gaze drifted up to the wall clock, her brow furrowing. "Always thought someone would fix that." Eli piped up, "Dad can fix anything." Marina smiled faintly, but her eyes remained on the clock. "Maybe some things aren't meant to be fixed." The words lingered, heavy and unresolved. Caleb cleared his throat, searching for something to break the tension. "We were about to head home. You hungry? Thompson's grocery has sandwiches, like I mentioned earlier." Marina shook her head, her smile tinged with something wistful. "Not tonight, but thanks." As she turned to leave, Eli called after her. "Hey, maybe next time you can show us your favorite pancake recipe." Marina paused, glancing back. For a split second, something unspoken flickered in her eyes, a mixture of nostalgia and longing. "Maybe next time," she replied softly. The door creaked closed behind her, leaving Caleb and Eli standing amidst the quiet echoes of the past. Caleb sighed, resting a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Come on, kiddo. Let's get home." They stepped back out into beige, the cooling evening, the neon sign buzzing faintly overhead. Caleb looked once more at the diner's front window, catching sight of the clock inside, frozen against the growing darkness. Something about the way Marina had stood there, her hand, trailing the counter like a woman balancing between worlds, stayed with him long after they left. The next morning rolled in crisp and bright, sunlight slanting through Caleb Foster's kitchen window as he flipped pancakes on the old griddle. Eli sat at the table, swinging his legs, chin propped in his hands. "Dad," Eli asked, "do you think Marina really knows how to make pancakes like Grandma used to?" Caleb glanced over, hiding a smile. "She might, but I don't think anyone can beat Grandma's secret recipe." Eli shrugged, unconvinced. "Maybe we could invite her next time. You know, show her how it's done." Caleb raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Eli's curiosity about Marina wasn't surprising. The woman had a way of lingering in people's thoughts, like a melody you couldn't quite place but couldn't forget. Later that day, Caleb returned to the garage, tools in hand, routine settling around him like a second skin. But as noon approached, a familiar sound caught his attention, the low rumble of a Chevy engine. He looked up to see Marina's red Impala pulling into the lot once more. She stepped out, carrying a paper bag, her expression softer than before. "Morning," she greeted, lifting the bag. "I brought something." Caleb wiped his hands and met her halfway. "That's so." She handed him the bag, and he peeked inside to find fresh blueberries and a carton of eggs. "Thought maybe Eli might want to help me try out an old recipe," Marina said almost shyly. "From the diner, back when pancakes were more than just a breakfast." Caleb studied her face, noting the guarded vulnerability beneath her casual tone. After a pause, he nodded. "Eli'll be thrilled." Within the hour, they gathered in Caleb's kitchen, the room filled with the warm scent of batter and berries. Eli stood on a stool beside Marina, concentrating fiercely as she showed him how to fold ingredients carefully. "Not too fast." Marina coached gently, her hands guiding his. "Pancakes need a little patience," Eli grinned. "Dad says that about fixing cars, too." Caleb leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching them work. It had been a long time since the house felt this alive, laughter and conversation bouncing off the walls like sunlight. Once the pancakes hit the griddle, Marina glanced at Caleb. "You ever think about fixing up the diner?" The question caught him off guard. "It's not mine to fix," he replied, trying to sound neutral. She nodded thoughtfully but didn't push further. Instead, she turned back to Eli, flipping the first golden pancake expertly. When they finally sat down to eat, the table felt almost like something out of the past, a slice of normalcy Caleb hadn't realized he missed. Between bites, Marina casually asked, "What happened to it? The diner, I mean." Caleb chewed slowly before answering. "Mrs. Calloway passed a few years back. Place closed not long after. Town's quieter without it." Marina's fork paused midway to her mouth. "My grandmother," she murmured, almost to herself. Caleb blinked, setting his own fork down. "You're related to her?" She gave a small nod, gaze fixed on her plate. "Her daughter was my mother. I spent summers here growing up, but after she passed, well, life pulled me elsewhere." There was a weight in her voice that Caleb recognized, the quiet ache of unfinished business, of roots untended. "You ever think about reopening it?" he asked gently. Her eyes flicked to his, uncertain. "I don't know. Places like this. Town, people move on. Not sure anyone remembers." Caleb's voice was steady. "Some of us do." The moment hung between them, unspoken questions filling the silence. Before either could say more, Eli chimed in brightly, licking syrup off his fingers. "If you fix up the diner, I'll help. Dad, too. He can fix anything." Caleb chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "Careful making promises on my behalf." But Marina smiled, something flickering behind her guarded eyes, a mixture of nostalgia and possibility. They finished breakfast, clearing plates together. Marina lingered by the sink, hands resting lightly on the counter. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at Caleb, though the words felt like they carried more than just gratitude for pancakes. He nodded, wiping his hands dry. "Any time." Before she left, she glanced once more toward the diner's direction. "Maybe I'll stop by there later," she said, voice almost casual. "See if it still feels the same." Caleb watched as she walked back to her car, something in his chest tightening without explanation. As her Chevy pulled away, Eli tugged at his sleeve. "Dad," Eli whispered, voice earnest. "I think she belongs here." Caleb didn't answer right away. He stared down Main Street where the old diner stood in the distance. Its faded walls, the flickering neon, the silent clock stuck at 7:15. "Maybe," he finally murmured, almost to himself. "Maybe we all do." The following week passed in the steady rhythm of small-town life, garage doors creaking open at dawn, the clang of wrenches, and the occasional hum of a passing pickup truck. Caleb Foster had grown used to the quiet predictability. It kept his worries at bay, like oil coating the gears of a machine running on borrowed time. But even Caleb couldn't ignore the envelope that arrived in Thursday's mail, stamped with bold red letters, "Final Notice." He sat at the kitchen table that evening, staring at the numbers scrawled across the paper. Eli had gone to bed, the house silent except for the faint ticking of the old wall clock he'd salvaged years ago, its hands faithfully moving, unlike the one in the diner. A low sigh escaped him. The garage mortgage, overdue. Repairs long deferred. Business trickling away. He folded the letter, tucking it under a stack of bills, as if hiding it might lessen its weight. The next morning, as Caleb adjusted the hood of an old Ford truck in his garage, the sleek purr of an unfamiliar car rolled onto the lot. He wiped his hands, brow furrowed as a polished black sedan came to a stop. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Victor Langston, impeccably dressed, hair silvered at the edges, eyes sharp like a man who'd seen too many ledgers, and a few front porches. "Caleb Foster," Victor greeted smoothly, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Heard you're still keeping this old place afloat." Caleb straightened, wary. "What can I do for you, Mr. Langston?" Victor glanced around the aging garage, lips twitching faintly. "You've done good work here, but times are changing, Caleb. I'm offering to buy you out, clear your debts, give you a clean slate." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Not looking to sell." Victor's gaze didn't waver. "You're a practical man. Can't be easy raising a boy running a place like this. Think what you could do without that burden." The words lingered, cutting sharper than intended. Before Caleb could respond, a familiar red Chevy pulled into view. Marina stepped out, giving Victor a brief glance before walking toward them, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Everything all right?" she asked, sensing the tension. Victor's smile widened, oozing charm. "Just a friendly offer." Caleb's voice was steady, but edged. "Not interested." Victor tipped his head, slipping a business card from his jacket. "Keep it anyway. Think it over." He turned, walking back to his car without waiting for further conversation. Marina watched him go, then looked at Caleb, concern flickering in her eyes. "What was that about?" Caleb exhaled, wiping grease from his palms. "Langston's got plans to buy up half the town. Thinks my garage is next." She studied him, quiet for a moment. "Is he right?" Caleb met her gaze, something raw beneath. His calm exterior. "I've managed fine so far," but even as he said it, the weight of that envelope burned at the back of his mind. Later that afternoon, Marina lingered by the garage's open bay, watching Caleb work. Eli sat cross-legged nearby, sketching something in a notebook, likely another invention involving wrenches and duct tape. Marina hesitated, then approached Caleb as he wiped down a tool. "I could help," she said softly, almost tentative. "Financially, I mean." Caleb's hands stilled. He didn't look at her right away. "I appreciate it," he replied, voice quiet. "But I don't take handouts." Her brow furrowed. "It's not charity." He offered her a small, tight smile. "Maybe not to you, but it feels that way to me." She wanted to say more, to push past whatever wall he'd built. But she could. See it in his posture, the set of his shoulders, pride carefully stitched into every word. So instead, Marina nodded, stepping back. "All right, offer stands." That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Marina found herself wandering down Main Street alone. The town felt hushed, paused between what it had been and what it might become. Her steps slowed as she reached Calloway's diner. The neon sign buzzed faintly, flickering against the growing twilight. Inside, dust clung to every surface, chairs, stacked neatly as if waiting for customers who never arrived. She pushed open the door, the familiar creak echoing in the empty space. The same booths, the same worn counter, and there, above it all, hung the diner's clock, frozen at 7:15, unmoved by the years slipping past. Marina traced a finger along the counter's edge, the silence pressing against her. She could feel her grandmother here, in the scent of syrup still lingering faintly, in the laughter the walls seemed reluctant to forget. And beneath it all, a quiet question tugging at her. What would it take to bring it back to life? The town wasn't lost. Not yet, and maybe, just maybe, neither was she. The scent of sawdust and old wood filled the air as Caleb set down his toolbox outside Calloway's diner. He glanced up at the faded neon sign, its flickering letters struggling to glow against the midday sun. The diner looked tired, but not. Beyond saving. Ready to give her a little life? Marina's voice rang from behind. Caleb turned to see her standing there, sleeves rolled up, determination etched into her features. She held a broom in one hand and a dustpan in the other, as if she'd already made up her mind. Eli trailed close behind her, arms loaded with a bucket of rags and a spray bottle. "Dad, I told Marina you could fix the lights too." Caleb chuckled, softly. "Guess I'm committed now." Inside, the diner felt like stepping into a forgotten photograph. Everything faded, but intact. Booth cushions split at the seams, the counter dulled by years of neglect, and dust resting like a thin shroud over every surface. But the bones were there, strong beneath the wear. They worked quietly at first, each task methodical. Marina wiped down tables. Eli scraped old gum from beneath the counters, and Caleb tackled the stubborn hinges on the front door. Every creak, every speck of dust seemed to carry whispers of the past. The clatter of plates, the soft hum of conversation, the jingling bell above the door. As Marina polished one of the chrome napkin holders, she caught Caleb watching her. "What?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "Didn't figure you for the roll-up-your-sleeves type." She shrugged, a teasing glint in her eyes. "Maybe you're not the only one who knows how to fix things." Caleb let the words settle, something unspoken hanging between them. A few hours later, the front door swung open, and in walked Howard and May Thompson, owners of the town's general store. Howard's suspenders hung slightly askew, and May carried a tin of cookies wrapped in wax paper. "Well, I'll be," Howard said, eyes scanning the room. "Didn't think I'd see the inside of this place cleaned up again." Marina wiped, her hands on a rag, smiling warmly. "We're just getting started." May leaned on the counter, eyes crinkling. "This diner used to be the heart of the town. Your grandmother had a way of making folks feel right at home." Her gaze softened as she looked at Marina. "You've got her eyes, you know." Marina swallowed hard, nodding. "I'm hoping to bring some of that back." Howard clapped Caleb on the back. "If you need anything, paint, nails, extra hands, you know where to find us." The offer felt genuine, weighted with the kind of community spirit Caleb hadn't felt in years. After they left, Marina stood by the front window, watching as the Thompsons disappeared down Main Street. "I didn't expect people to care so much," she murmured. Caleb leaned beside her, arms crossed. "They've been waiting for a reason to." She looked at him, something soft and uncertain in her eyes. "You think it's worth it? All this?" He hesitated before answering. "Some things are." Their eyes lingered, the quiet between them comfortable now, familiar. Eli's voice broke. The moment. "Dad, the jukebox won't turn on." Caleb pushed off the window, walking toward his son. The jukebox sat in the corner, its buttons faded, the glass dusty. Caleb knelt, fiddling with the wiring beneath. "Think you can fix it?" Marina asked, leaning over his shoulder. Caleb gave her a sidelong glance. "Might take some coaxing." As he worked, Marina wandered over to the wall clock, her eyes tracing the unmoving hands, still frozen at 7:15. She stood there for a long moment, fingertips brushing the frame. "I wonder why no one ever fixed this," she said softly. Caleb glanced up but didn't answer immediately. Finally, he replied, voice low, "Maybe it was easier to let it stop." Her gaze remained on the clock, as though trying to read something hidden in its silence. Later, as the sun began to dip and they packed up for the day, Marina paused at the door. "You're not the only one who's been fixing things, Caleb," she said, her voice gentle but sure. He met her eyes, a flicker of something warm settling in his chest. Eli chimed in, tugging at Marina's hand. "You coming back tomorrow?" She smiled, tussling his hair. "Wouldn't miss it." As she walked out, Caleb watched her cross the street, the soft glow of the diner lights reflecting in the window behind her. Inside, the diner still needed paint. The booths needed stitching. The jukebox remained silent, and the clock's hands hadn't moved, but somehow it already felt like something had shifted, like the town itself had taken a breath, waiting for the next note to play. The days blurred into a rhythm. Morning coffee, afternoons filled with scraping paint, repairing booths, rewiring lights. Caleb hadn't meant for it to happen, but the old diner had become a part of his routine again. More than that, it had become a part of them. Him, Eli, Marina, and the quiet hum of something stirring beneath the surface. It felt almost easy, until it didn't. That morning, Caleb arrived early, toolbox in hand, to find Marina already inside. She stood at the counter, carefully sorting through a stack of old ledgers and faded photographs. She looked up when he walked in, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Early start," she said softly. "Could say the same to you," Caleb replied, setting down his tools. There was something off in her posture, shoulders tense, smile wavering. He noticed the papers she quickly shuffled into a folder and set aside, as though she didn't want him to see. Before he could ask, the bell above the door jingled, and Eli bounded in, holding a folded piece of paper. "Look, Marina," Eli beamed. "I drew how the diner will look when it's finished." She knelt to take the drawing, her fingers brushing his. Caleb watched as her eyes softened, though something flickered behind them. Something distant. "You've got quite the imagination." "Eli," she murmured. The boy grinned proudly before darting toward the jukebox, determined to make it play. Marina straightened, glancing at Caleb. "Mind if I step out for a bit? Just need to take care of something." Caleb nodded, though the question in his eyes remained unspoken. As she slipped out, Caleb noticed the folder she'd left behind on the counter. He wasn't the type to pry, but something about the weight she carried today gnawed at him. He hesitated, then flipped it open. Inside were legal documents, letters, deeds, and right there, in crisp black ink, was her full name, Marina Calloway Langston. His chest tightened. Langston. The same name stamped across the business card Victor had handed him days before, the same man trying to buy up the town. He felt the air leave his lungs before he could process it further. The bell jingled again. Marina returned, stopping short when she saw him standing by the folder. Their eyes locked. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she crossed the room slowly, voice quiet but steady. "I was going to tell you." Caleb swallowed hard, fingers brushing the edge of the folder. "Langston," he said, each syllable careful. "You're related." She nodded, chin lifted slightly. "Victor's my uncle." The weight of realization settled over him like a wrench dropped on concrete. Caleb took a step back, tension creeping into his shoulders. "You're the one who owns the diner, not just helping fix it. You inherited it." Marina's eyes softened, but her voice remained even. "I didn't come back to sell it. I came back because I didn't know who I was without it." Caleb shook his head, struggling to piece it together. "All this time, you let me think you were just passing through." Her lips parted, words caught somewhere between explanation and apology. "I left years ago, Caleb. I thought I'd closed that chapter, but when my grandmother passed and I inherited the diner, I didn't know what to do with it." She took a step closer, voice trembling slightly. "Then I met you, Eli. This town. And it wasn't about the diner anymore. It was about remembering who I used to be." Caleb looked away, jaw clenched. Trust didn't come easy to him. Too many years spent patching things up, only to watch them fall apart again. "I don't know what you're after," he said quietly, "but I don't take well to surprises." Marina's breath caught. "I didn't mean to lie. I just wanted a chance to belong again." The words hung heavy between them, fragile and raw. At the doorway, Eli's voice broke the tension. "Dad," he asked, holding up a wire, "can you help me fix the jukebox?" Caleb looked at his son, the earnestness in his face. He exhaled, slowly, forcing himself to soften. "I'll be right there," he murmured. When he glanced back at Marina, her eyes held something he couldn't name, a mixture of regret and something deeper, something honest. Without another word, she gathered her things and quietly slipped out the door. The diner felt too quiet after she left, the hum of possibility replaced by something hollow. Caleb stared at the folder one last time before closing it gently. Then he looked up at the wall clock, its hands still frozen at 7:15, unmoved by the storm that had just passed. The next few days passed like heavy clouds rolling low over Main Street, thick with something unsaid, a tension lingering just beneath the surface. Caleb threw himself into work at the garage, refusing to let his thoughts wander beyond the wrenches and carburetors in front of him. Each clang of metal felt easier to face than the memory of Marina standing there, confession hanging between them like a wire pulled taut. But avoidance had a short shelf life. Late Thursday afternoon, as he tightened bolts on an old pickup, a sleek black sedan pulled onto the lot. Caleb wiped his hands, jaw tightening, even before he saw who stepped out. Victor Langston, dressed sharp as ever, tailored coat crisp, smile polished. He approached casually, as if they were old friends catching up rather than men on opposite sides of a quiet battle. "Afternoon, Caleb," Victor greeted smoothly. "Got a minute?" Caleb straightened but didn't bother with pleasantries. "What's on your mind?" Victor glanced around the garage, then slipped a folded sheet of paper from his coat. "I've finalized the offer," he said, handing it. "Over. Not just for you. Thompson's store, the old diner, a few other properties, package deal, clean break." Caleb unfolded the paper, scanning numbers that promised debt relief, tidy profits, easy exits. It was more than fair. Generous, even. Victor's voice remained calm. "I've been patient. Folks here deserve a chance to move forward. Town like this, it's not built to survive anymore, but I can give everyone a fresh start." Caleb's jaw clenched. "Or you can bulldoze what's left of it." Victor's smile didn't falter. Progress isn't always pretty. Before Caleb could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed from across the street. Turning, he saw a familiar figure walking toward them. Howard Thompson, sleeves rolled up, expression tight. Behind him, a few other townspeople trailed, word having clearly spread. Howard came to a stop beside Caleb, eyeing the paper in his hand. "That what I think it is?" he asked gruffly. Victor's charm remained unshaken. "An opportunity, Howard. Time to let go of old ghosts." Howard crossed his arms. "Maybe we ain't ready to let go." Caleb glanced at him, something steady, flickering in his chest. But before anyone could speak further, another voice broke through. "Is it true?" All heads turned to see Marina standing a few paces away, her eyes locked not on Caleb, but on her uncle. Victor's smile softened slightly. "Marina, thought you'd be on your way back by now." She stood her ground, voice calm but cool. "I heard you're making offers." Victor nodded, trying to help. Folks here deserve better. Marina's gaze flicked briefly to Caleb, then back to Victor. "And what happens after you buy them out?" He offered an indulgent smile. "Strip malls, condos, people need convenience these days." The silence hung thick, the weight of choice pressing against every word. Marina exhaled, slowly. "They don't need convenience, they need each other." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if seeing her differently. "You've always been sentimental. It's not good business." Marina's shoulders straightened. "Maybe not, but not everything should be a business transaction." Caleb felt something shift then, not just in her, but in the air around. "In them." Howard turned to Caleb quietly. "We don't have to sign anything today." Caleb glanced down at the offer still in his hand. The numbers stared back at him, practical, tempting. But when he looked up, at Howard, at the small cluster of townspeople gathered, at Marina, he realized it wasn't about practicality anymore. It was about who they wanted to be when the dust settled. He folded the paper slowly, handing it back to Victor without a word. Victor gave a faint chuckle, taking it. "Think it over," he said smoothly. "You know where to find me." With that, he turned, walking back to his car, leaving a strange stillness in his wake. As the sedan disappeared down Main Street, Marina stood quietly, eyes unreadable. Caleb watched her for a long moment before breaking the silence. "You should have told me sooner." Her gaze flicked to his, pain flickering behind her steady expression. "I know." He hesitated, then added softly, "But I guess we've all been keeping something to ourselves." The words hung there, neither an apology nor an accusation. Just the truth. Howard clapped Caleb's shoulder. "Town meeting tomorrow night," he said. "Figure it's time we all decide together." Caleb nodded, and as the others slowly dispersed, he glanced back toward the diner. Its windows reflected the fading light, the neon sign still flickering stubbornly, and inside, behind the dusty glass, the old clock remained frozen at 7:15. Time. Waiting, holding its breath. Tomorrow maybe it would start moving again. The garage smelled of oil and rust, the scent familiar but somehow heavier that morning. Caleb stood beneath the lifted hood of an old Ford, his hands moving automatically, tightening, adjusting, wiping grease away, but his mind refused to stay focused. Every time he closed his eyes, the scene from the day before replayed. Victor Langston's offer, Marina standing firm in front of her uncle, Howard's quiet defiance, the weight of the town's uncertainty pressing down on his shoulders like an old injury. For years, Caleb had convinced himself that all he needed to do was keep his head down, fix engines, raise Eli, pay the bills 1 month at a time, keep moving, keep mending. But standing there yesterday with his neighbors gathering behind him, something inside had shifted, and now, for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure if fixing cars would be enough. The sharp clang of the garage bell jolted him from his thoughts. He looked up to see Eli, his boy's face flushed from running. "Dad," Eli panted, holding out a folded piece of paper. "They're putting up signs around town." Caleb wiped his hands, taking the flyer. Langston Development Proposal. Community. Presentation tonight. Below, the words were printed bold and crisp. "A brighter future for our town." Eli's voice was small. "They want to tear everything down, don't they?" Caleb folded the paper tightly, setting it aside. "They want to change things." Eli stared up at him, hesitant. Are we gonna let them?" For a moment, Caleb didn't answer. His eyes drifted to the corner of the garage, where his late wife's old photo still rested, smiling, full of life. How many times had he told Eli that some things were worth fighting for, even when they seemed too broken? He glanced back at his son, saw the flicker of hope mixed with uncertainty in his eyes. "Not without a say," Caleb said quietly. That afternoon, after closing the garage early, he found himself standing outside Calloway's diner. The door creaked, open as he stepped inside, dust motes swirling in the afternoon light. The place looked much the same, tables half-sanded, tools stacked neatly in the corner, the jukebox still silent. And there, seated at the counter, was Marina. She looked up when he walked in, surprise flashing across her face before she quickly masked it. "I wasn't sure you'd be back," she admitted softly. Caleb hesitated for a moment, then took a seat across from her, resting his arms on the counter. "I've been thinking," he began, voice measured. "I've spent a lot of my life fixing things, cars mostly, stuff with clear instructions, parts that fit together if you know how to look." Marina watched him carefully, not interrupting. "But somewhere along the way," he continued, glancing around at the diner walls, "I stopped believing I could fix anything that really mattered." He exhaled slowly. "Yesterday, when you stood up to Victor, it made me realize maybe I've been wrong." Her gaze softened, and she folded her hands together on the counter. "I didn't come back here to stir up trouble, Caleb," she said gently. I thought I could keep my distance, sell the place quietly, move on. But the more time I spent here, the more I realized how much I've been running. She paused, swallowing. You said once that some things are still worth fixing. I think I finally understand what you meant. Caleb nodded, his expression serious. Town meetings tonight. Folks are scared, they're tired, but they need to see it's not too late. He met her eyes directly. I want to help you reopen the diner. The words hung between them, charged with something unspoken. Marina's breath caught, but her voice was steady. I want that too. A faint smile curved her lips, the tension between them easing like something long unknotted. As the sun dipped lower, they worked side by side, moving tables, dusting off menus, testing the lights. Caleb fiddled with the jukebox wiring, while Marina scrubbed down the counter with determined focus. Neither spoke much, but the quiet was comfortable, purposeful. As the sky outside darkened, Marina paused beside the old wall clock, her eyes tracing. The frozen hands still stubbornly stuck at 7:15. She glanced over her shoulder. You ever think about fixing this? Caleb wiped his hands on a rag, walking toward her. For a moment, he simply stood beside her, staring at the clock. Maybe tonight's the night, he said softly. The clock remained silent. The room hushed, but expectant. Later, as they stepped outside, the glow of street lamps casting long shadows on the pavement, Caleb turned to Marina. You ready? He asked. She smiled faintly, but there was steel beneath it. I am. Together they walked. Down Main Street toward the town hall, the flickering neon of Calloway's diner glowing behind them, a heartbeat waiting to be revived. The town hall was packed tighter than Caleb had seen in years. Familiar faces filled every seat. Howard and May Thompson seated near the front. The Brewsters from the hardware store, Mrs. Green from the library, even a few younger folks Caleb hadn't realized still lived in town. Whispers buzzed like static electricity through the room, a low murmur of uncertainty and guarded hope. And there, standing at the podium in his polished suit, was Victor Langston. Calm, controlled, every word delivered with rehearsed ease. Progress is inevitable, Victor declared, his voice smooth as silk. Our town deserves more than boarded-up shops and empty diners. This is a chance to modernize, to thrive. Polite applause rippled, but it was hollow, uncertain. Caleb stood at the back, arms crossed, heart thudding in his chest. He hadn't planned to speak. He'd always preferred actions over words, the quiet work of tightening bolts and fixing what others overlooked. But tonight, silence felt like surrender. Beside him, Marina stood still, her posture composed, but her eyes flickering with something. Deeper, resolve and regret mingled. The mayor called for open comments, and an uneasy pause filled the space. Then, without fully realizing how or why, Caleb found himself walking toward the front. Every pair of eyes followed. He cleared his throat, gripping the edge of the podium harder than necessary. I'm not much for speeches, he began, voice steady but low. Never have been. A soft chuckle broke through, a ripple of familiarity. Folks knew that about him. Caleb drew a breath, glancing at Victor briefly before fixing his gaze on the crowd. I've spent my life fixing things. Cars, mostly. Things with parts you can swap out, screws you can tighten. It's honest work. You see the problem, you solve it. He paused, scanning the faces before him. But there are some things you can't fix with a wrench. Silence settled over the room. For a long time, I figured this town was like one of those broken-down engines, past saving. Easier to let it rust out than waste energy trying. He glanced toward the back, where Marina stood near the doorway, her eyes locked on his. But lately, he continued, voice softening, I've been reminded that some things are worth fighting for, even when they seem too far gone. He looked down for a moment, gathering himself. This diner we've got, he said, gesturing vaguely. Callaway's? Used to be where everyone came together. Birthdays, bad days, days where you just needed a cup of coffee and someone to listen. A few heads nodded, murmurs of agreement. That kind of place doesn't show up in progress reports or profit margins. But it means something. We've let too much slip away already. He swallowed, words thick in his throat. So I'm not selling, not my garage, not my piece of this town. And I hope the rest of you won't either. He stepped back, hands still, trembling slightly, and felt Marina's gaze steady as an anchor across the room. Victor's smile was polite but tight. It's a noble sentiment, he said smoothly. But sentiment doesn't pay the bills. Howard Thompson stood suddenly, clearing his throat. Maybe not, he said gruffly, but it's kept this town standing longer than any corporation ever has. A ripple of applause broke out. Small at first, then spreading like wildfire. Caleb felt something lift in his chest, light but powerful. The meeting wound down. Victor packed up his papers without another word, slipping out into the night. Caleb didn't watch him go. Instead, he turned toward Marina, who waited quietly by the door. They walked in silence back down Main Street, past the rows of shuttered shops and quiet windows. The cool air buzzed faintly with something alive, unspoken. Finally, as they reached the diner, Caleb stopped. He glanced at her, voice low. I'm sorry. She looked at him, brow furrowing gently. For what? For shutting you out, he said, the words rough but sincere. For not seeing sooner how much you were trying. Marina shook her head, her smile tinged with something soft. You had every reason to doubt me. They stood there, the glow from the diner's neon sign casting shadows across their faces. It's not just about the diner, Caleb added quietly. It's about fixing more than engines, fixing the things that matter. Her eyes glistened faintly in the lamplight. Maybe we can fix it together. A long pause stretched between them, filled with something fragile and hopeful. Finally, Caleb offered a small, genuine smile. Yeah, he said softly. I'd like that. She stepped forward, hand brushing his briefly. A touch light but grounding, like the promise of something beginning. Inside, the diner remained unfinished. Tables half repaired, jukebox silent, the old clock still stuck at 7:15. But tonight, something invisible had shifted. Tomorrow, they would return, paint the walls, stitch the booths, maybe even fix the clock. But for now, the quiet understanding between them was enough. Some things, after all, were finally starting to move again. The morning of the reopening dawned crisp and golden, the kind of late spring day that felt stitched together with possibility. Main Street, usually so still, buzzed with quiet anticipation. Caleb stood outside Callaway's diner, his hands resting on his hips as he surveyed the scene before him. Fresh coats of paint gleamed under the sunlight, the diner's old red and white trim restored to its former charm. The neon sign above flickered to life, not entirely steady, but alive. Much like the town itself. Inside, the booths had been reupholstered, the counters polished until they shone. Fresh flowers sat in mason jars on each table, their bright colors softening the edges of the space. But more than that, it was the people who filled the place now. Neighbors, friends, families, voices mingling in laughter, plates clattering, and coffee brewing. The heartbeat of the town had returned. Caleb felt a hand at his elbow and turned to see Howard Thompson, sleeves rolled up, eyes crinkling with a grin. Didn't think I'd live to see this place packed again. Howard chuckled, surveying the crowd. Town's got you to thank, Caleb. Caleb shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. Not just me. Howard clapped his shoulder before disappearing back into the sea of customers. Across the diner, Eli zipped between tables, proudly delivering pancakes, his apron slightly too big, his grin wide enough to light the room. Caleb's eyes drifted to the counter where Marina stood beside the register, greeting familiar faces. She wore a simple dress, her auburn hair pinned back, a touch of flour on her cheek from the morning rush. Their eyes met across the room, and something warm settled deep in Caleb's chest. He crossed to her, weaving through the tables. The noise of conversation humming around them. "Looks like you did it," he said, nodding at the bustling diner. Marina smiled, but there was something soft in her expression, something that held the weight of the last few months. "Not just me," she echoed quietly. They stood for a moment, watching the swirl of life happening around them, the laughter, the clink of dishes, the sound of Eli's voice rising above. It all, as he asked customers if they wanted extra syrup. Caleb shifted, his voice lower now. "You think your grandmother would have approved?" Marina glanced around, her eyes glistening faintly. "I think she would have said it's exactly how it should be." Her gaze drifted upward, and Caleb followed her line of sight to the wall clock above the counter, the same clock that had sat motionless for years. Except now, the hands moved, slow, steady, but undeniably ticking forward. Caleb felt something catch in his throat. "I fixed it yesterday," Marina murmured, her voice barely audible. "Figured it was time." He swallowed, nodding, letting the moment settle between them like a quiet promise. Outside, the bell above the door jingled as more townspeople streamed in. Caleb glanced at the door, then back to Marina. "You ever think about staying?" he asked carefully. She met his gaze, the hint of a smile curving at the corners of her lips. "I already have." The words landed soft but sure, anchoring themselves in the space between them. Before either could say more, Eli bounded over, breathless. "Dad, Marina, we're almost out of pancakes," he exclaimed, eyes wide. "Everyone loves 'em," Marina laughed, ruffling his hair. "Guess we better get back to work." Caleb crouched, pulling Eli close. "You're doing good, kid." Eli grinned, then darted back toward the kitchen, leaving Caleb and Marina standing side by side. For a moment longer, they lingered, the hum of the diner wrapping around them. "Feels like we're right where we're supposed to be," Caleb said softly. Marina's fingers brushed lightly against his hand, her smile deepening. "Yeah, it does." As they turned back to the counter, the diner's walls seemed to glow, alive with history and possibility. And above it all, the old clock ticked steadily forward, its hands no longer stuck in time, but moving, carrying them into whatever came next. The sun had long since dipped behind the rooftops when Caleb twisted the lock on Calloway's diner door, flipping the sign to closed. The last plates had been washed, the chairs stacked, and the laughter from the evening crowd still lingered, faintly in the air. Inside, only the warm hum of the jukebox remained, its soft glow casting shadows across the polished floor. Marina stood behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. Across the room, Eli, already in pajamas, lay curled in a booth, sketchbook forgotten beside him. Caleb walked over, glancing at the jukebox, then back at Marina. "You know," he said, voice low, "it's been a long time since this place saw a proper dance." She smiled, a glint in her eyes. "Maybe it's overdue." Without another word, Caleb stepped to the jukebox and flipped through the song titles, stopping when he found one worn thin from years of play. A familiar tune filled the diner, soft and easy, the kind of song that felt stitched from memory. He crossed to her, offering a hand. Marina hesitated only a second before slipping her hand into his. They moved slowly, swaying beneath the soft lights and faint neon glow, the world narrowing to just the two of them. No crowds, no debts, no doubts, just the quiet understanding of two people who had weathered enough storms to know the worth of moments like this. As they danced, Marina's gaze drifted upward, resting on the old clock, ticking steadily above. "Them, my grandmother told me once," she murmured, "that she met my grandfather right here at 7:15 on a summer evening. Caleb followed her eyes, something warm unfurling in his chest. She said she always thought that's why the clock stopped there. Marina added softly, like it wanted to remember. Caleb squeezed her hand gently. Seems like time's been waiting for you to set it moving again. They danced until the music faded, the diner wrapped in silence and something sweeter. Later, as the night settled deeper, they carried Eli upstairs to the small apartment above the diner, the place Marina had decided to call home. The next morning came bright and full of promise. For the first time, Caleb found himself in the apartment kitchen, sleeves rolled, flipping pancakes while Marina poured coffee, Eli setting the table. The simplicity of the routine, the laughter, the ease, felt like something precious, stitched from old threads into something new. Eli grinned as he grabbed plates. Best pancakes in town, made by Dad and Marina. Caleb caught Marina's eye across the counter, and for a brief second, the weight of everything, what they'd lost, what they'd found, settled in his chest, light but undeniable. Downstairs, the bell jingled as the day's first customers trickled in. Before heading down, Marina paused, turning to Caleb, voice softer. You ever think about Sunday night dinners? She asked, a playful glint in her eye. Big ones, community style, everyone welcome. Caleb smiled, wiping his hands. Sounds like something worth building. As they descended, the diner hummed to life once more. By mid-morning, the front door swung open, and in stepped Victor Langston. The room quieted briefly, all eyes flicking his way. But there was no edge to his stride today, no sharpness in his gaze. He walked slowly to the counter, nodded politely to Marina, and met Caleb's eyes. Place looks good, Victor said simply, voice even. Better than I remember. Caleb nodded, wiping his hands, waiting. Victor glanced around. The packed booths, the laughter, the scent of coffee thick in the air. Guess you proved me wrong, he said after a pause. Some things aren't meant to be bought out. Marina offered a faint smile. Some things just need time. Victor's lips twitched, almost a smile, before he tipped his head. Well, he murmured, turning toward the door. Good luck keeping up with all this. And with that, he stepped out, the doorbell jingling softly behind him. Caleb exchanged a glance with Marina, neither needing to say anything. Some battles didn't need to be fought to the bitter end. Later that evening, as the diner quieted once more, they stood side by the front window, watching the soft glow of Main Street stretch out before them. Eli's laughter floated down from upstairs, and the jukebox hummed faintly behind. Caleb glanced at Marina, voice low. You ever think about what's next? She smiled, leaning into him slightly. Maybe expanding, she said. A little outdoor patio, some live music nights. He chuckled. Sounds ambitious. She looked up at him, something steady in her eyes. I've learned second chances are worth investing in. Caleb hesitated, then reached for her hand, his thumb brushing gently across her fingers. Maybe we should start thinking about third chances too, he murmured, voice rough around the edges. Her smile deepened, quiet but sure. Above them, the old clock ticked on, steady, unwavering, its hands finally moving forward, marking not just time but the start of something lasting. And outside, the town stretched on beneath the warm evening sky, alive with possibility. So what did you think? Did Caleb and Marina's journey remind you of a special place or person from your own life? I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what small-town memories or second chances mean the most to you? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and it always warms my heart to hear your stories. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on that little notification bell so you never miss when we share more heartfelt tales like this one. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Your support means the world. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the smallest acts of goodness leave the biggest marks.